Dan Schneider. Hey guys, it's me, Kai, aka K-Filet.
Hi, sorry to disturb you this late in the night. I have a serious inquiry directed towards Nickelodeon. My question is, what the fuck are you doing?
I just got some new glasses. They're progressive lenses. They help me see a lot better, but I'm still getting used to them, and I look like a very stern auntie. Recently, the documentary short series, whatever, called Quiet on Set just came out. It was about the workplace at Nickelodeon during the late 90s and early 2000s, the peak Dan Schneider era. Me personally, I was never allowed to watch iCarly as a kid. I wonder why. I was allowed to watch Victorious, and I feel like that definitely shaped me into the man I am today, for better or for worse. Frankly, I didn't have a lot of problems with Quiet on Set. It basically confirmed everything me and everyone my age knows, that they were mad weird at Nickelodeon, but you didn't really know the full extent to which the weirdness eventually became, illegality. And it's pretty interesting. So I recommend it if you have HBO Max or Discovery Plus or whatever that Temu site Discovery Plus is, or whatever. Watch that. About a week or two ago, the documentary came out, and a couple days afterwards, Dan Schneider himself got on his own channel and made sure to promote it. I'm scratching a mosquito bite on my leg. Relax.
I know I watched that Dan Schneider documentary, but I'm not that weird.
Dan Schneider had an interview with the dude who plays T-Bo from iCarly.
Hey, it's Boogie. I played T-Bo on Nickelodeon's iCarly.
It is horrible. It's a horrible interview. He basically goes in a very circular motion when answering everything, and it is extremely embarrassing. 90% of everything he says is just horribly phrased, just deflective statements.
Some people think that some of those jokes are inappropriate for children. What do you think of that?
Jokes that you're speaking of.
That the show covered over the past 2 nights. Every one of those jokes was written for a kid audience, because kids thought they were funny, and only funny, okay? Now, we have some adults looking back at them 20 years later, through their lens, and looking at them and saying, oh, yeah, that's appropriate for a kid's show. And I have no problem with that. If that's how anyone feels, let's cut those jokes out of the show. Just like I would have done.
If Dan Schneider didn't do all this, he would have made a great politician, to be honest. He managed to make a 20-minute long video where he basically said nothing except, well, if I was younger, maybe I wouldn't have done it.
Experiences were fantastic. And the fact that I didn't pay that forward to every employee that walked through my door, it hurts my heart, because I should have. And I wish I could go back and fix that. That was wrong. And that was because, I was an inexperienced producer. I was immature. Wouldn't happen today. But I'm just really sorry it happened.
Thanks, Dan. That really makes the women you sexually harassed feel better. I'm just going to go over everything he said and just give my thoughts. Dan, I'm disappointed in you. So right at the beginning, you can tell something's wrong because he is interviewed by Boogie, the guy who plays T-Bo from iCarly.
Hey, it's Boogie. I played T-Bo on Nickelodeon's iCarly.
And already, just the fact that he's interviewed with somebody who works for him is not good. It looks weird. It looks bad, frankly. If it was a neutral third party, or even one of the people from the documentary, or somebody he knew, or if he even interviewed T-Bo,
Hey, it's Boogie. I played T-Bo on Nickelodeon's iCarly.
with one of the people from the documentary that accused him, that would have been something, like Real Housewives or whatever. Also doesn't help that the entire time T-Bo is just aggressively meat bouncing on Dan. It is genuinely embarrassing to see. Like, every single question he goes like, well, Dan, I know you wouldn't do that.
Or 2 women who spoke about a wage discrepancy. Now, I know that you don't divvy out salaries. Talk to me about that.
You know me. You've been on my sets.
Well, regardless of what some people may think, I think it's only positive that you are there for people when they need you.
Me? Tebow? I know you wouldn't do that. Like, thanks, man. Oh, that really puts us at ease. Straight off the bat, Dan is going like, I owe them an apology.
I regret, and I definitely owe some people a pretty strong apology.
I owe everyone who I hurt an apology. Like, bro, you need to be blacklisted. That's what you owe them. Perhaps even jail time. Because as you'll see, a lot of the stuff that happened is not just like, oh well, boys will be boys. He is a genuine freak. He's a freak, bro.
I'm all up in it like a wee dinner. I hit it from the back. I skid in the eye. When you play my song, you say, ah, that tongue thing.
Oh. Also, why not just talk to them? He would have done it different. He would have done it. That's what Dan's saying. So basically, I'm just gonna go topic by topic and talk about everything what they talk about and how they responded to it. Massages. In the Quiet on Set documentary, they basically explained that at the time of the late 90s, early 2000s, when Dan was really like the height of his career, he would do a thing in which he got a PA, a wardrobe assistant, just any female member on set, and then have them give him a neck massage, back massage, whatever. And if you are in tune with, the law, basic human decency, you'll know that is illegal. That's sexual harassment, sexual misconduct. It is not just weird that the fact that he's asking for it is specifically women, which adds to that. So that's not great. Dan responds by saying, hey, it was wrong and it was gross and I'm sorry.
In that position, it was the wrong thing to do. I'd never do it today. I'm embarrassed that I did it then. I apologize to anybody that I ever put in that situation. And even additionally, I apologize to the people who were walking around Video Village or wherever they happened, because there were lots of people there who witnessed it who also may have felt uncomfortable. So I owe them an apology as well.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's sexual harassment, buddy.
Dan, talk to me about the writer's room. From what I saw, not cool.
In the Quiet on Set documentary, they talk about the very strange conditions of the writer's room, shall we say. The fact that, less so the fact that it was only a few people, more so the fact that there were only like 2 women at the height of his career, and they had a split paycheck.
I remember speaking to the line producer, and she said that I was going to have to split a salary with a writer that I did not know.
So they were getting 2 for the price of 1. They were going to hire 2 women and have them share a salary.
In the documentary, they explain that along with the weird shortage of women in the writer's room and the split paycheck, he also would act inappropriately towards them. And at one point they said forced one of the female writers to talk about a high school experience whilst bent over a table pretending to be sodomized. And there was a lot of harassment, a lot of bullying, a lot of speaking over, yelling, shouting. And he was silly me. He was the ringleader of it all. And in here he says, hey, I'm sorry I participated in that.
Let me just say, no writer should ever feel uncomfortable in any writer's room, ever, period, the end, no excuses. Most TV writers, comedy writers have been in writers' rooms, and they are aware that a lot of times there are inappropriate jokes made and inappropriate topics come up. But the fact that I participated in that, especially when I was leading the room, it embarrasses me. I shouldn't have done it. And I can tell you why it hurts really.
Like, no, you didn't participate in it. You started it. You lit the fire. I don't like this entire thing. He's using very passive language. He's like, I participated in it. I was there for it. You started it. You were in charge. You'll see he kind of makes it seem as if he was just like a guy who was kind of there. Like, no, you were the head honcho. You were the top shotta. Everyone listened to you, Dan, but okay. He says in it that they were practical jokes.
In the writer's room, there's no doubt that sometimes those jokes went beyond the pale, and I said things that went too far, or made practical jokes that went too far, and that was wrong.
Dan, come on now. The weirdest thing to me is that he tries using the I was young card, which is a very risky play.
That was because, I was an inexperienced producer. I was immature.
Now, usually that works when you're in high school, middle school, even college. He was 30 years old. He was like 27, something like that at the time, going into his 30s, 40s, towards the end of his reign at Nickelodeon. And he still wants to use the I was young card. Like, this isn't something that, Leonard Nimoy or whatever did back in like the 80s. This happened a decade ago, not even. He got fired in 2018. It is 2024. That was 6 years ago. So he was doing all this up until then. Also, it's really, again, really risky to try and play the I was young card. I was young and naive and green. You were in charge of children. If you were not fit to lead an entire team of adults and children, then why would you continue? Then he says there were times where I wished I could have called them back and apologized because I snapped at them and yada yada. Not even I wish. He said there were times I wanted to call them back.
There were so many times I wanted to pick up a phone and call some of those people and say, I'm so sorry and let's talk about it. And I wish you'd had a better time, and I wish I could have shown you a better experience.
Man, if only he could have called them back. But sadly, it was only the 1990s when people were still using carrier pigeon. Now, here's the weird joke section.
From my heart and from my hands, why don't people understand my intentions? Weird joke.
If you're familiar with Nickelodeon in any sense of the imagination, you will know that they are freakazoids, bro. They are just straight horn dogs, especially Victorious. He basically says
every one of those jokes was written for a kid audience because kids thought they were funny and only funny. Okay?
In the documentary, there's a scene where the girl from Zoe 101 or whatever has I don't even know what it's called, like a jelly stick or something like that, which is already weird. She's doing it and she's like, and then cracks it open, and then it's like, ooh, a jelly stick, oopsies. And then it's already weird because it shows it cuts away and then shows the jelly being like on the screen. So it's already weird on the wall. And then they do it again, this time on the girl's face. She's like 14, 13, and it's like, ugh.
Have another goop off. Thanks. I don't know why the other one squirted out like that. All I do is squeeze a little like this.
Like, no, we see you. And even in the documentary, they're like, oh, it's a cum shot. And and then Dan's like, well, if I thought they were inappropriate, if anyone on set thought they were inappropriate, we would have cut it immediately.
Through their lens, and they're looking at them and they're saying, oh, I don't think that's appropriate for a kid's show. Mm-hmm. And I have no problem with that. If that's how anyone feels, let's cut those jokes out of the show. Just like I would have done 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I cut it. I cut it. I cut it. I cut it.
Also, he says that they just cut it immediately if it was too inappropriate, but then also says that there was a team of producers and executives board coast to coast or whatever that was watching them and heavily scrutinizing them and making sure everything was on point.
Okay, there were many, many levels of scrutiny. Okay, we had executives in LA. We had executives in New York.
So two coasts.
Two coasts of approval, yes. And by the way, approval at every stage, really.
Okay.
And I'm talking about wardrobe. I'm talking about makeup, sound, sets, dialogue, jokes, everything.
So does that mean that everybody was bad at their jobs? The fact that you're apparently just like third, fourth in command, and all those people above and below didn't see anything wrong with this 13-year-old girl. Ugh, I got covered in slime. Like, no, we know what's happening. Even as kids, we know what it looks like. Next up is his control.
Fuck Nickelodeon. We Nickelodeon. We niggas loitering.
Segueing from talking about the inappropriate jokes, he says, if anyone had a problem with it, they would have said something. And Tebow, thank God, for once, after this entire time, again, I can't stress this enough. He's just like, Dan, I know you wouldn't do it. I know you wouldn't do it, Dad. But that's what they're saying. Like, just shut up. Finally, he pushes back.
Now, I'm gonna push back a little bit.
And he's like, well, in the documentary, they say that you were very controlling and that everybody was scared of you. And he literally says it in the most plain phrasing ever.
The series painted you in this way that you were just the guy that was doing what he wanted. And people were afraid to confront you about things. So just humor me.
And Dan, rather than just saying, okay, whatever, giving a straight up response, he just doesn't answer it straight up. He literally answers like a different question. I was writing down notes and I was like, did he? Okay, I must have missed it. But no, I was like, he just straight up does not answer it. It's crazy.
Confront you about things. So just humor me. Say that was the case. What would have been the ultimate way to...
Okay. If nobody on the set, if all of the dozens and dozens of adults that were on the set, if they didn't say anything, if my bosses said, if they insisted, you got to make a change here, you got to cut that, I had to do it. I had no choice.
Got it.
If my bosses told me to change it, then I would. But we're not talking about your bosses. We're talking about you, Dan. Nobody even asked about changing stuff. We're asking about the fact that you're Hitler on the set. They said they were literally scared of you. Okay, just not going to answer that. That's fine, Dan. Thank you. Next up is the on-air dares.
What the fuck did you do with Gibby? Why the fuck was his shirt always on?
Basically, on Nickelodeon, at a certain point, there was a segment or whatever they had called On-Air Dares, which was basically Fear Factor, but with kids. Now, me, my mom, my dad, we all love Fear Factor. And if you know what Fear Factor is, I feel like I've said this 1,000 times with this thing alone. If you know what it is, you'll know that's a very stupid idea. Because children are not meant to be put in scary situations. And Fear Factor is only scary and gross and just disgusting situations. And they say that was a problem. At least Dan says that. It was a problem trying to write scenarios in which they weren't scary or whatever.
Was tasked with doing these on-air dares with the All That cast. So we get with the writers and we come up with all these ideas, and it's hard to do because we don't have the budget of Fear Factor, and we can't put the kids in dangerous situations like the adults are put in. So it was hard to come up with stuff. But we would come up with all these ideas of dares they could do. We would give them to the network, and they would say, tell us the ones that were okay. Right. Those are the ones we shot. Those are the ones that aired.
It's like the thing is with Fear Factor, they're grown men, grown women. They sign up by themselves. And they come in and they're like, hey, even though I've seen all these other people do it and I know it's going to be scary and gross, I choose to do it. But these are children. And a lot of the time, they're not even given a chance to ask. And they even say in the documentary, there will be times where the kids will be asked something and then the parents will have to step outside. Okay. Anyways.
At the time, I had no indication that any kid ever had a problem with them.
Because this face screams nothing but excitement, right?
But when I was watching the show over the past 2 nights, I now know that there were kids who did have problems with the on-air dares. And it breaks my heart. And I'm so sorry. I am so sorry to any kid who ever had to do a dare or anything that they didn't want to do or weren't comfortable doing. We went out of our way to make sure they were safe and that everything was done properly. But
gross, and I'm covered with peanut butter.
if a kid was scared and didn't want to do it, kids shouldn't have had to do it.
Yeah.
Just like, it's like this weird disconnect. It's like, do you hear what you're saying? It just doesn't make sense. You're like, well, we just had to write different scenarios. Like, no, just don't do it. If it's a kid's show, Fear Factor, they don't mix, don't do it. Like, would you do Jackass but with kids? Now that would be crazy. If you had like, I feel like if Disney or something did that, that would go nuts. You know, you have Fletcher, Fletcher from Ant Farming, Gabe from Good Luck Charlie on the Mighty Bad set doing like kick flips into a jar of needles or whatever. Like, that would have been a crazy episode in all honesty. And then in regards to the on-air dares, he's like, well, if anyone was scared, they could have just come to me. They could have just told me they weren't comfortable with it. But it's like, why not just ask them before and after, like, hey kids, is anyone feeling a little iffy about this? Also, I just keep blanking. It's weird how he does it. He just like make Jedi mind tricks you into forgetting. They said there was no room for anyone to speak out and talk about what they did or didn't like. And the fact is, in this thing, he doesn't even address that. He just goes like, well, you know, and then just segues off. It's really weird. And then again, Dan, he has this really contradictory mindset when he's talking in here. He says, I would have cut it then and there if I knew that anyone was uncomfortable. I would have cut it right then.
I would have changed it on the spot. Let's cut those jokes out of the show, just like I would have done 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I cut it.
You know, I would have done this immediately. I would have done this immediately. It makes it seem as if he has all this power where he would have done everything and just cut it right then and there, helped everybody's problems, just fixed cancer and world hunger immediately. If only anyone told him that they were not liking, you know, getting a scorpion put in their mouth. Oh man, I would have done something right then and there. But it's like, he also tries to make it seem as if he was just like some guy who was just on set and he just happened to be in charge of everybody and had complete creative control and also didn't really need to answer to anybody except the literal highest point of Nickelodeon.
Okay. No, not my colleague. No, these are my bosses. Bosses, and then their bosses, and then their bosses. And they're approving all of this. Anything. If my bosses said, if they insisted, you got to make a change here, you got to cut that, I had to do it. I had no choice. That I was getting those opportunities. And I went in and I got lucky because they were great. My first couple of experiences were fantastic. And that was because, you know, I was an inexperienced producer. I was immature.
Like, you can't have it both ways, Dan. You can't be like, well, I'm just a little boy. Also, I'm 30. No, make up your mind. The wage discrepancy.
That Victoria shit got kind of mid after the second season.
Talking about the split paychecks and everything like that. Tebow, again, immediately, he's like, well, Dan, I know you wouldn't do that.
We also saw the series highlight 2 former writers viewers, 2 women, who spoke about a wage discrepancy. Now, I know that you don't divvy out salary.
Oh my God, bro, is dick riding all you do? No, I'm saying you literally got that nigga dick in your mouth right now. I see it.
Basically, Dan Schneider explains that there's a process in which younger and newer writers get to come in and help out on a show, except there's a limited amount of space on a writer's room. So they'll be like, well, we want you and we want you. So why don't the 2 of you come in, split a paycheck, and both of you get to have a seat?
It's very simple. There's a common practice in television when hiring writers. If you have a spot for a new writer, sometimes You'll go to 2 writers and say, hey, if you 2 new writers for your first job are willing to share a salary, you can both have the job. They have the opportunity to say, yes, that sounds good, or no, no thank you.
Now, on one hand, that sounds really cool, being able to hire 2 people at once. However, on the other hand, if you just hear how that sounds, that doesn't sound quite legal. And even in the documentary, they point out, they're like, wait, that seems kind of weird. And he's like, well, I've done this plenty of times. I've done it with 2 women. I've done it with 2 men. I've done it with a man and a woman. But it's like, well...
Thank you. In this case, it was 2 women writers. I've done another show where that teaming was done with 2 male writers, and they split a salary. I did another show where it was a male and a female writer, and they split a salary. So,
and these are all first-time writers.
All first-time writers looking for their first gig.
Got it.
Not only is the sex of the people involved the question, just the legality of it, because the writer in the documentary brings up the fact that they mentioned it to like Nickelodeon or somebody, and then they immediately called in like the IRS or something. Like, it was just immediately a red flag. And then, you know, afterwards, Dan was like, hey, why'd you do this? I'll kill you. I'll fire you, you know, yada, yada. Hey, Dan's just being silly. But just the fact that it doesn't sound legal or ethical at all. And then he was like, well, you know, it's perfectly fine. And if they don't want it, they don't have to take it.
Hey, if you 2 new writers for your first job are willing to share a salary, you can both have the job. They have the opportunity to say, yes, that sounds good, or no, no thank you.
These are all first-time writers.
All first-time writers looking for their first gig.
Like, no, what you're doing is I feel like that's like some form of domineering. Like, hey, man, you can either take half a paycheck or you take no paycheck, and you can just go work somewhere else. It's fine. They just can say no and be broke.
I was like, well, I'm excited. I get to stop temping.
This was my dream job. I mean, this is what I wanted. This is why I worked so hard for. I'm not about to turn it down. I thought to myself, don't be a complainer, you know, do whatever you have to do to get this job.
And the whole Dan threatening her about bringing it up and the legality, they just don't mention it in this. Now, that's something, if you've seen the documentary, they just don't bring up a lot of stuff. But hey, maybe Dan just forgot. He's a nice guy. If he was Dan 30 minutes ago, he would have told himself to remember. Because that's just how Dan is. He's just a nice guy. The racism.
Wasn't no real niggas watching him read Danger, man.
I swear, this nigga Tebow is really pissing me off.
They also highlighted 2 black actors who said that they felt overlooked. Now, I want to be clear. I'm never going to speak on anyone else's journey. Yeah, I can talk about my experience, how my experience was with you, what I saw prior to working with you. But again, I don't want to speak on anyone's journey. I saw you be honored for diversity in your work.
Yes, and the reason for that is...
I can't speak on anybody else's journey. And then he just throws him an alley-oop to talk about how not racist he is. Shut up. In the clip, Dan Schneider, he's like, hey, I made sure to highlight diversity and yada, yada, whoop-de-whoop. I had a black kid, I had a black kid, I had a black kid, and I had a black kid. And I had Ariana Grande. Okay.
And the reason for that is diversity has always been very important to me in my shows. If you go back to the very first Nickelodeon show I ever made, that's very evident, as it is in the second one, and then the first movie I ever made for Nickelodeon, which starred Kenan and Kel, and every show I did after that had a lead black actor in it. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, Dan, you did a good job with diversity. And then he's like, well, and all of them have had successful careers since leaving.
But not only am I proud that they were in my shows, I'm exceptionally proud of the achievements they've had beyond my shows, and they've gone on to bigger and better things, and that gives me a great sense of pride.
Good for you, Dan, for putting them on the map, I guess. 1 point, Dan. But yeah, he's not wrong. Leon Thomas, the third dude who played Andre from Victorious, he produced that song Snooze by SZA.
Hey, nigga, fuck Dan Schneider. All my niggas don't fuck with Dan Schneider. Hey, what y'all niggas think of Dan Schneider?
That nigga weirdo.
He is.
Criminal.
Nickelodeon's been investigating this nigga for years. Push the fucking button. Jamie Lynn Spears could have been the next Mary-Kate and Ashley. Look at her now. Britney Spears' sister. Yo, I heard you got Ned's Declassified canceled because it was the only show in y'all's mutual network combating your ratings. That's fuck nigga shit.
I can ask. His weird relationship with Amanda Bynes. Amanda Bynes was basically his favorite star. Not even originally they said there was another girl who was there and she was his favorite. And then she hit puberty. And then Dan was like, ew.
I don't want to play with you anymore.
Amanda came in and she became the new favorite. So, Dan, I'm watching you like a hawk. Again, this little Tebow, he's like, hey, Dan, that really bothered me. That really hurt my feelings.
Well, something that really kind of bothered me was how they depicted your relationship with the cast.
Yeah, it bothered me too.
Yeah, just...
I know what you are. He explained that at the time, a lot of different young artists and actors and stuff like that wanted to be emancipated from their parents, which is basically just the process of saying, hey, I don't want my parents taking a huge chunk of my money, so I'm going to try and separate myself from them. And also just so I can have better creative control and just control in general. Britney Spears wanted it. Drake Bell, which we'll bring up later, wanted it. A bunch of other people wanted it. And Amanda Bynes just happened to want it. And so in the show, they say that Dan Schneider was basically her number one supporter. And in here, Dan Schneider says, well, I was just on her team.
Amanda was between the ages of 16 and 17, and she wanted to get emancipated from her parents, which was a fairly common thing with successful young actors, at least at the time.
Sure.
And she wanted that for herself. So she turned to her team, which included her lawyer, her agent, her manager, her publicist, me, because she included me as part of her team, thought of me that way.
Which does seem extremely likely. He says there was also a bunch of lawyers and, executives and producers and such that she chose to represent her. However, what he doesn't say is why or how he ended up on her team and why he'd stay.
We supported her. She tried to get emancipated and ended up not working out, and she didn't.
In the show, they made it seem like they said that Amanda Bynes was basically just like his star child. And so he wanted her to have creative control, not just for her own well-being, but also because he's freaky Dan. My real question is, why would you, he just made it seem like, one day I was just doing my laundry and then whoopsie daisy, I just ended up on Amanda Bynes' legal team? Oh?
Her manager, her publicist, me, because she included me as part of her team, thought of me that way. We supported her. She tried to get emancipated and ended up not working out, and she didn't.
I got transported to another dimension and wound up on Amanda Bynes' legal team? That would be a great isekai. You're throwing out a lot of good ideas, Dan. Hey, maybe you get to add some feet into it, too. It could be a killer. Oh, yeah, I was just minding my business. And all of a sudden, I was on her emancipation team. If you did want to do it, why didn't you say anything? And if you did, why? Either way, he doesn't explain it. He just talks about it. He was like, hey, it is what it is. Dan, explain yourself, please. Then Tebow again.
Regardless of what some people may think, I think it's only positive.
Regardless of what some people might think, I think it was only positive.
Oh, kill yourself. There were rumors of Dan being banned on set.
That said, let's talk about some of the things that have just been swirling forever.
Okay.
You were banned from your set.
Never happened. That is a false rumor.
What happened?
Add it to the list of false rumors.
Talk to me. What happened?
He says, I tried to make a show with 2 adult actresses go away because neither one of them wanted to be on it.
There were adult actresses at the time, and they had their own specific reasons for not wanting to do the show anymore. I'm not judging that. It got tense, and what they don't know, maybe, is I did everything I could to make that show go away. My producer partner at the time, we would call and say, this is not a good situation.
Okay.
So I'm
like 99% certain the show was Sam and Cat, because it seems like from Jeanette McCurdy's book, which we also need to talk about. There are like Smosh videos and stuff like that where people talk about it. Like some of the people on Smosh worked at Nickelodeon and Disney, and one of them talked about how Ariana Grande just didn't want to be there because of the level of fame she was at, and the fact that Sam and Cat just wasn't at the same quality as either iCarly or Victorious.
She does not look happy to be there.
She wasn't. Oh my gosh. Oh my god. She was not. She was not. Ariana Grande, as an actor to actor, great. I really enjoyed working with her. She was hilarious. She can sing like literally nobody's business.
Yeah, I've heard
and
of
she sung the word like 14 times in a row in the greatest harmony you've ever heard. I mean, that's who it is. But she delayed us like 3.5 hours because she needed her weave redone because they force her to have colored hair. So she doesn't want colored hair in real life, so they have a weave of her colored hair. So it's just like, and also she's like busy doing all her stuff, and now she has to come on our show. So I get why she wasn't happy to be there.
That's like when I guest starred on Sam and Cat, and the premise of the episode was she gets stuck in a box, and she's just not there.
Yes.
And I'm like, yeah, they wrote this so she didn't have to be there.
Yeah.
And Jeanette McCurdy didn't like it because her mom was the devil, basically. And at this point, I basically just had a question to myself and to Dan, really. I'm like, what did you do, Dan? What could you do, bro? Because you're like, he said, like, I tried to make it go away, but I couldn't. And it just stayed there. And it's like, dude, you can't control the wages. You can't pay people right. You can't stop the harassment. You can't make anybody feel heard. You're a little racist, or at least racism is happening on set. Kids are getting raped on set. There's just like this horrible negligence, favoritism, this, that, and the other. And he's just like, well, I couldn't do anything to stop it. And yet he has top billing on every single call sheet, and he's listed as the main writer, and he's listed as the executive producer. And I'm like, dog, what did you do then? If you didn't do anything, what did you do? Did you just sign your name on the call sheet? Hey guys, I'm here. All right, time for me to go clock out. What did you do, Dan? If you couldn't help anybody in any way, what did you do? Were you just support? It sounds like you were just a fluffer, to be honest. Like you didn't do anything except go, good job, everybody. And then, oh, it doesn't look that way to me. I asked the board. There's nut on my face. It just looks fine to me. And then, also, another thing that they bring up in the documentary, but not in this response video, of course, that there was a skit in which he sat in a hot tub with Amanda Bynes. She was in a swimsuit, but he was in like day clothes or whatever. Now, and then there was also another skit in which they called Dan God, basically like, hey, we don't need to question Dan. He's like a god. But I'm sure it was those horrible writers getting underpaid by Nickelodeon. And I'm sure it was those horrible writers and executives that forced you to do it. And those same writers who forced you to sit in that tub with that underage girl while you were fully clothed and she wasn't. And I'm sure it was that horrible team that forced you to sit in the limousine being fed shrimp scampi by a supermodel. I'm sure you just hated it. Oh, ugh. Yucky, I don't want anything to do with that.
Hi, welcome to my YouTube. And my special guest is the executive producer of the amazing show, Dan Schneider.
Hi.
Now, you're the executive producer of the show?
Yeah, I am the executive producer and I'm the head writer.
You actually wrote the words we're saying together right now?
Yes, I actually wrote this whole conversation that we're having right now.
I see. Now, since you're the executive producer of the show, can I write?
No.
Okay. How about I play the spaghetti?
Nah.
No?
I'm kidding, I'll have some spaghetti. Bring the spaghetti. All right.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
It's like, why put yourself in normal clothes and then put her in a swimsuit? It seems like you're aware of how weird it is for a 30-something-year-old man to sit in a hot tub with a middle schooler. So why not put both of you guys in either both of you guys in like a jumpsuit, swimsuit, whatever, onesie, or both of you guys in day clothes sitting in the hot tub. That would be pretty funny. Just a normal interview, but in a hot tub. Or here's something, just getting a little silly here, guys. maybe you don't need the hot tub. Next up, he talks about Brian Peck. No relation. Finally, Dan is able to take a breather now that someone worse than him, officially, is able to step in and take the heat. Basically, Brian Peck was a acting coach, and he worked with all the kids, so he was really on set a lot of the time. And eventually, he weaseled his way in with one of the actors, the child actors, and was like, hey, you don't even need your dad, who's like your manager. You know, you can just have me. Like, I'm a better talent coach and everything. And in fact, let's work with your mom. Let's get your dad out of here, and I'll be with you 24/7. And the kid was like, okay. And he did. And he weaseled in, and the dad was like, this guy is a creep. And he was. He touched on like everybody, and he was really touchy-feely. And everyone said, hey, listen, Dad, I think you're just homophobic. He's a proud gay man, and I think you just don't like seeing people happy. And so he was basically ostracized, and his kid was handed over to this weirdo. And his one request was to his ex-wife, and he was like, whatever you do, do not leave my son alone with this man. And she was like, whatever. And she did, and for God knows how long, the boy was molested. And it is really tragic, and it's only made, well, not made worse, but it's really sad because the boy in question was Drake Bell of Drake and Josh, and the second worst Spider-Man performance.
Come on, dog, that's too soon.
Okay.
Brian Peck was not hired by you.
No, I did not hire Brian Peck.
This was a Tolan Robbins production?
Yeah. Here's the kicker that I really don't get. After he got out of prison and was, to my knowledge, a registered sex offender, he was hired on a Disney Channel show.
And Dan is, to be honest, he's right. He's on point. 2-0, Dan. Good job. But 2 against 1,000, whatever. But it's sick to see that this dude, Brian Peck, no relation to Josh Peck, was able to basically, he got convicted, and everyone knew it, and everyone saw it, and it was proven, and he went to jail. But he only went to jail for like a year, 2 years maybe, got out, and then not only got another job in film industry, but on another kids show, and the show was Zach and Cody. So not only did he get out, he practically stepped up, if you think about it. So that is sick to think about, that the fact that this dude got out and was just off the hook. It's sad. It's really sad. But this, again, does not put Dan or Nick at any less fault. Now, Dan, he seemed to be very helpful. He seemed to help Drake with everything, talked out with him and helped him.
And when Drake and I talked and he told me what had happened, I was more devastated by that than anything that ever happened to me in my career thus far. And I told him, I'm here for you. What do you need? But Drake's mom, a lovely woman who I stay in contact with this day, she came to me at the time and she said, Dan, I'm not good with words like you are. And would you help me with my speech for the job?
But again, just describing it, there were so many clear red flags. In fact, in the documentary, they show that not only was he touchy-feely, he was touchy-feely with kids. A young Leonardo DiCaprio he worked with, he was rubbing all on his arm and stuff like that.
Leo, as you know, is the latest, hottest, hunkiest teen idol there is.
Yeah, muscles.
Look, speaking of hunky, huh?
Leo, what's it like to be a teen?
And they're like, well, that's just how he is. Like, well, don't let him touch kids. I know, crazy idea, crazy. But it's like Drake's dad told them time after time after time, and Nick did nothing. But I'm like, did he just not consult Dan It seems like you would. And they never fully say if he talked to Dan or not. I'm just, now for the first time, I'm just thinking about it. I don't think they ever really said if he talked to Dan Schneider about it. And Dan never really said if he was told about it before, because he said he was telling everybody. He was telling the coworkers, the PAs, the this, the that, the this. Oh, right, the PAs. There was another dude. There were like 3 other dudes who were like child molesters at the same time who were also employed there. One of them was named Jason Handy. I'm like, that just sounds like a South Park bit. That is so on the nose. Like, dog, his name is Jason Handy, and he's a pedophile, and nobody saw it coming. It just writes itself. But in all honesty, this one falls more as a short failing on Nickelodeon's part than Dan Schneider's. Good job, Dan. Also, I was watching this part at like 10 o'clock at night, and I just screamed out like, no! They're like, here are all the people who were rooting for Brian Peck. It was James Marsden, the Easter Bunny, Cyclops, the guy from Sonic. Everybody was on his side. I was like, come on, man. Also, the only thing I put right after that is he look and sound like Al Toybarn when he cries. And
would you help me with my speech for the judge? And I said, of course. And I did.
I don't think it's too far off. So while Tebow is finally taking his Gatorade break after his aggressive meat writing session with Dan, Dan finally gets to speak a little, and he says his final thoughts.
iCarly, I don't care if you look like Michael Jackson, as long as you giving me action, and Freddie gon' film the reaction.
So, in it, this is the last time, I think, out of like the 5 times I've had to say it in accordance to the 60 weird offenses, he's right. He says that if he could change, like improve it in any way, there should be a psychologist.
If you're hiring young actors, minors, to work in television, I would suggest that we have a licensed therapist there to oversee that process, for the specific reason of making sure that those kids really wanted to do this job, that they really wanted to be on television. Maybe they should even be informed about what that means. What's it going to mean if you're famous? What's that going to mean on social media? What's it going to mean within your family? Let them find out. And then that way, if a kid doesn't want to be on a TV show, they can opt out. That psychologist, that therapist could come to us and say, this kid doesn't want to do it, or their parents aren't understanding of what's going to come. And then we could avoid the mistake of ever putting a kid in a TV show that didn't want to be there.
The responsibility and everything like that, and he is 1,000% right. Because a lot of people back then just didn't fully understand it. And sometimes I feel like now they're still trying to fully get a grasp of how impactful, from such a young age, a lot of these people are going to be, I had a final question planned out. My original final question was going to be, if your family psychological expert idea passed, would you, the young Dan Schneider, even care? If they said Ariana Grande or Miranda Cosgrove or Jamie Lynn Spears or even Amanda Bynes, their family said, hey, we don't want to do this. This is too much pressure. Or if they wanted to convince them that they might not be equipped for this, would that person still be on set? Would they see the call sheet the next day? Would they even get paid for doing said job? But I feel a more impactful question that I want him, if he were to see this, and if you watch this, to think about. It's if there wasn't a literal television documentary special highlighting every single thing you did wrong in the span of 20 years in 4 episodes, would you be sorry? Now, I know there are a lot of people over the course of, the past couple of years who've been Me Too'd or, canceled or whatever, and had old things brought to light in which they apologize just because they forgot about it and they're like, hey, I'm not that person anymore. That's fine. You know, everybody famous has had to do that at some point. However, this man did this for 20 something years. He did this from 1994 to like 2018. That was how long. Until 2018, the Me Too thing happened and he finally got fired. But before that, he was still acting like this. And up until the time he got fired, you could still see the same things plaguing back then, plaguing now. And it's just like horrific. It's weird. Like, people knew for years. We see the feet stuff. We see the, you know, wet t-shirts and hot tubs and goo and slime getting squirted on their faces and backs and breasts and stuff like that when they're 16, 17 years old at the most, at the youngest 12. You know, like, you did this for 20 years. People knew. We knew. We were kids and we knew. We watched it. People made memes about it. People made songs about it.
The girls I've sexualized are all in their 20s and 30s. Disclaimer!
And it was literally up until 2018 before you got fired. You could literally look up Dan Schneider on Google and it would just be straight stuff about how he's a weirdo, how he's a creep, the feet stuff, the feet stuff, the feet stuff. And it's like, regardless of any good idea, well-intentioned idea for a child psychologist, and even if you have, no, you haven't changed. Not even if you haven't changed. You just got caught, and now you feel bad that you got caught. So now you got to say that you feel bad in general about how you used to be, even though it was like 6 years ago. That's how you are. And it's not like 6 years ago, if I did something bad, 6 years ago, you know, if somebody else did something bad. It's 6 years ago and 20 years before that of you continuing to do it. It's like, and in the end of this video, they say any extra thoughts. He doesn't talk about anything that wasn't in there that could help his image. He doesn't talk about his favoritism to Amanda. He doesn't talk about Amanda not having to go to school, the on-set school at the time, or letting her skip, letting her cut school entirely, or get out early to pitch ideas. He doesn't talk about the constant child negligence. Ned from Ned's Declassified was talking about how he was getting some sloppy toppy on set.
Did your thing.
No.
I don't remember that
100%.
at all.
So which one do you remember? The one on the couch?
No, I remember the one in the backseat of your car. We can't talk about this on the pod.
Wow.
Dude,
Yeah,
I can't
we got
believe-
busy. We got busy in quite a few places.
Games, I get money, fuck hella hoes. Matter of fact, I'm getting head right now on the video game, bro. What are you?
More like Heads Declassified. He doesn't talk about the foot stuff, and he doesn't talk about Jeanette McCurdy's entire book. Huh? Dan, did you see that? Maybe you did. It had a really impressive title. But he doesn't say that. Seems like at some point, everybody who was on set with Jeanette McCurdy saw it or knew about it. There's a short, an interview segment where Jerry Trainer talks about it, and he basically all but confirms that she's not off about Nickelodeon, you know, paying off kids and parents to be quiet and giving them $600,000 worth of hush money to be quiet about the weird stuff.
Came out with Jeanette McCurdy. I want to ask you all about that. Have you spoken with her since the memoir came out? Can you empathize with her? And what is the vibe on set to make sure no one else ever feels that way? Because clearly she did battle things from her younger years, but do y'all talk about that? Or do you talk to her?
I did talk to her. I read it immediately and I talked with her, and it's heartbreaking, but it's also brilliant and funny, and I felt a lot of pride for her being able to speak her truth. And I talked with her about it, and I said exactly that. I was like, you know, because it's heartbreaking, but she's very strong and very perceptive, and you can see it in the writing how smart she is, and you know, that's stuff she's going to deal with for her whole life. But she's amazing. I mean, her book tour, she's she's using it, and she's growing stronger because of it.
You can't convince me that he didn't know. They all but say, Dan Schneider was a creepy freakazoid as like the chapter title name. They call him the creator because he's listed as the creator of every show. But maybe it's just somebody else. Maybe it was those 2 writers you hired for half the price. I don't really know why I made this. I don't really like doing topical stuff, to be honest. I feel like I just needed to say something because me personally, I grew up with this television, some of these shows. I really liked them. I really liked Victorious. I liked Sam and Cat. I liked Henry Danger. I didn't like Game Shakers as much. But, I did like Keenan and I did like Kel. So it's just heartbreaking over the years realizing how weird the show was and finally getting a basically official explanation from people involved. Now, you could say, if you were a cynical man, you could say that these were all dejected people from Nickelodeon who didn't get the fame and recognition they wanted and wanted to make a hit piece on Dan Schneider. But, dang, sorry about that. But it's like nobody, Ariana, Miranda, none of these people except Tebow have come forth and said Dan Schneider is a good man and he has not abused people, he has not harassed people, and he has not exploited people. People know for a fact that that would be a bold-faced lie to tell. And maybe if Dan just sat down, that's the thing with cancel culture and everything. You don't really, man, I look like Frankenstein. That's the thing with cancel culture. You don't really know where it's supposed to end. Some people just want reparations. Other people want just full on blacklisting. To be honest, I feel like maybe the least he can get is blacklisted, which is a wild thing to say. However, a lot of this stuff deserves jail time. You sexually harassed women, endangered minors, negligence, this, favoritism, grooming, this, that, this, just really, and not to mention the money stuff. There are so many money problems that I'm not even smart enough to tackle, as you can probably tell from the fact that I'm just a bumbling mess. But it's like, I don't know, Dan, if you really, he spent this whole interview talking about how he wishes he could make things right, how he wishes he could have gone back in time and told past Dan, no, don't do it, past Dan, don't be an evil bastard to everybody you worked for 20 years. And he would have been, future Dan, of mistakes, future, of yet to come, of course, I'll make sure to do that. And he would have done it magically. But however, Dan, we do not have time machines. You can't go back in time and tell past Dan with the power of the Speed Force to not tell women to bend over and moan about high school. That's not right. We don't have that. Sorry, Dan. Consult with Ezra Miller. Maybe they'll get you something. But it's just like, if you want to make it right, just sit down with them. Here are my thoughts. Sit down in a room with anyone who doesn't work for you, or the people who work for you and didn't have a good time, and just say sorry to them. Not a general sorry, not I wish I could have been more sorry, not if I was sorry back then, maybe none of this would have happened. We know. Just go see them. Say, I'm sorry. How can I make this right? See what they want. And pray the entire time. Pray that they don't say prison, because that's honestly what you deserve. Nothing you've said, nothing has been set in stone that you've committed any of these crimes. However, it is highly possible, like 99.99% possible, that you've done it, because just the fact that nobody has come forth except Tebow to say, hey, Dan didn't do this, here are the bank statements, here are the archival footage recordings, and everything you've done by your own doing has lined up with that. So I don't know, Dan. You've made your bed, so go ahead and take off your socks and cover them in peanut butter or whatever and lie in it. I don't know why I made this. I just wanted to say something. I felt like I had to. And it's not like I'm going to get money for this. I've got 80 subscribers, dog. I just wanted to... It just felt really weird seeing him play the victim so desperately. If he just came forward like a man should, and this isn't even a manly thing, it's a maturity thing. He keeps going like, I'm just this little boy, I didn't know what I was doing. You were 30 years old. Like, I feel like there's no way to say this without sounding ageist or whatever. But dog, you were old. You knew what you were doing was wrong. You still kept doing it. And yet a lot of people kept trying to just go like, well, you're the mad genius. You're the wonder child. You're this, you're that. And just kind of hand wave it away that you didn't really mean it. But you did. You weren't a good person, and you probably still aren't. But now that you've seen it, and now that your actions have physical, tangible, visible consequences, you want to say you're sorry. That's not how it goes. You know it's... But whatever. You know, we don't have time machines. So, I just got off track again. Dan... I guess, Dan, the only thing I can say to console you or whoever may be supporting Dan is, I guess, just wait till somebody makes a Butch Hartman special or if somebody makes a Disney Channel special, because I know Disney's been up to something. We know it, and they haven't been as vocal or made it as public as Dan Schneider has by recording all the cast members sitting around and them feeling uncomfortable and posting it to the YouTubes on his Pear phone. But it's like, we know Disney. So I guess, Dan, if you're watching this, which you probably won't be, but if any Dan supporters or Dan is watching this, just wait for the Butch Hartman special, wait for the Disney special, you know, maybe crowdfund it. Do it yourself. That's about it. Something quick. I feel like this might take a while with editing, but I just wanted to say something. Do something. And thank you all for watching. Whoever may watch this. I don't know. My channel, it's still mad small, but it's really nice to see everybody watching these. Whoever finds these and just saying how weird the videos are and how I didn't even mean to find this, but thanks. You know, so thank you for whoever watches this, because it just puts a smile on my face knowing that if anyone watches my videos, they'll feel a little better. If they might feel a little better. Thank you for watching. Thank you for spending your time devoting, who knows how long this is going to be, to watching this. And that's about it. Bye-bye.
I can't feel my face, oh God. SMH, no ASMR. Show me where the profits go. Show me how to keep my pussy close. She said, you better count your blessings for real. Amen.